One thing that really stands out is how you just don't give a flying four-letter word when people come at you. And that is something from afar that I truly adore because I am sometimes in my feels. However, let's I'm going to run through this super quickly in case someone has quite literally woken up from a coma and have no idea who you are. In September 2017, that's when you called Donald Trump a white supremacist. And then ESPN put out the statement where they were like, hey, we addressed it with Jemele, blah, blah, blah. And then the freaking press secretary, who is now the governor of Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, said your comments were outrageous. She called what you did a fireable offense, which is just like from afar. Again, if you're watching this, like, fuck off. Like, who cares? Who absolutely cares? That why are you weighing in on ESPN? But we've seen how this White House certainly, treats these things. Trump tweeted about the ratings because that is quite literally, there's two things he's upset with, maybe three: his hair, his money, and ratings. Those are the three, not his kids. But what I want to touch on is a piece for Slate that Joel D. Anderson wrote, because I found this to be rather interesting. It was an ESPN talent gathering of 2017, and part of the reason for the meeting, he wrote, was, he said it, partially, not fully, was your tweets. And then a new social media policy was released, and he wrote, and I quote, it all had the feel of a slickly produced high school pep rally. That new policy mandated that we avoid outright partisanship and seek permission before commenting on political or social issues on the air or on social media. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I will say there's a slight amendment to that in the sense of that town hall meeting was actually planned before I did,
Oh,
before I called Donald Trump what I did on Twitter because I
oh.
was supposed to be a part of it. That's how I know. Is that they saw that with the tone in the country, it changed, a lot in 2017, and that there were quite a few people who, quite a few members of ESPN's, broadcasting team that really wanted to understand or wanted to say things about what was happening in the country. And it was becoming kind of a real slippery slope. Add on top of that, the fact that at that point, ESPN being perceived as this liberal company that is politically biased and, anti right wing. And, they made it seem like ESPN was the kid at school with like purple hair and skate culture. Like ESPN's literally never been that. And so there was a lot of conversation about whether or not ESPN's social media guidelines were reflective of the times, or should they more reflect the times, or like what was the parameters and what could people say, what could they not say, and like just trying to get a handle on it because even though mine was the most publicized incident, they had certainly had other incidents where you had ESPN talent stepping into political waters and it becoming a big story. I mean, like Kirk Schilling, that happened with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's said a lot of things about politics, and there was a lot of blowback from some of the things that he said. And so it wasn't purely directed about me, but it became about me because then I had the most public incident. So I was actually supposed to be at that meeting and wasn't because I believe it happened when I was on suspension.
Mm.
Maybe I think that's that. And even if it hadn't, I don't know if I would have been the person in the room that should have been there, because obviously I would have had a lot to say about it. But I think that's why it's so interesting to see where ESPN is now in this moment, because a lot of, whether it be understood or not, a lot of the supposed directives and the things that they were saying you couldn't do then have completely gone out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually glad because I do understand that Disney has a bottom line to protect, but also understand that there are, they're not just broadcasters and talent that works at ESPN. These are people who are participants as American citizens. Like they're here too, and there are going to be some days where things are happening in the country, and you don't want to always be tweeting about who's going to win the AFC East,
Right.
And so I think they have come to understand that. that these political times are a lot different. I also, to be frank, think that it helps that they have the people who tend to speak out politically that I've seen, that there is a combination of right-leaning views and left-leaning views. I mean, I think probably mostly now is right-wing or
Hmm.
right-leaning, I should say. Those, views have been, and Stephen A has kind of represented both. So it's more down the line, and because of that, I think it gives them the permission and the comfort to lean into it a little bit more than they probably ever have.
Former NFL punter and proud outspoken advocate, Chris Kluwe. Hello, Chris. How you doing?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for hopping on. I have a ton of questions for you, not just with what happened at the city council. I know that that has been the talk of the town, and we're going to start with that, but also some random football questions that I have for you down the line. So everybody knows it at this point, but I will read the transcript. You stated to the Huntington Beach, all conservative, by the way, city council, quote, MAGA stands for trying to erase trans people from existence. MAGA stands for resegregation and racism. MAGA stands for censorship and book bans. MAGA stands for firing air traffic controllers while planes are crashing. It's the wrong word here is funny, but it's almost funny that that isn't even talked about at this point because of all the crap that we're dealing with. MAGA stands for firing the people overseeing our nuclear arsenal. MAGA stands for firing military veterans and those serving them at the VA, including canceling research on veteran suicide. MAGA stands for cutting funds to education, including for disabled children. MAGA is profoundly corrupt, unmistakably anti-democracy, and most importantly, MAGA is explicitly a Nazi movement. You may have replaced a swastika with a red hat, but that is what it is. First off, wow. Secondly,
Thanks.
how long did it take you to find the words to describe MAGA to a T like this?
So it actually didn't take very long to describe it. The thing that took a lot of time was actually sourcing it, right? Because
Mm.
when I knew I was going to put this speech up online at some point, and I wanted it to be like people couldn't just say, "Oh, you're being hyperbolic," like you're making stuff up. Every single claim that I make in there is actually sourced to a news report, and from reputable institutions like the Guardian or CNN or semi-mainstream media. Like this isn't just like some fringe website. Like these are things that are actually happening. And so, yeah, I definitely had a plan in mind of how I wanted to portray MAGA, and it's the truth. Like that is who they are.
Agreed. What I found to be pretty interesting is when I was going through the city council and the members of the city council. Obviously, you're a Huntington Beach resident. You know about this stuff. But
Mhm.
council member Gracie Vandermark, as the LA Times reported, once created a playlist on YouTube titled Holocaust Hoax! Exclamation point. I mean,
Mhm.
just a little fucked up. She used the term colored people to refer to black folks. She goes to events with the Proud Boys. I
Mhm.
believe she went after displaying the pride flag in public as well. Pat
Yep.
Burns, the appointed new mayor of Huntington Beach, showed up to one meeting with a busk of Trump. He declared Huntington Beach a non sanctuary city. We could go over the other members as well. But I suppose the question is, how do you even reach these people when they don't want to be reached and they just want to basically bat signal to the president that they are loyalists through and through?
Right. So that's really been kind of the struggle is making the rest of the community aware of who these people are. Because Huntington Beach leans fairly conservative, but it's a really small C conservative, right? Like it's people who want lower taxes and don't build houses in my backyard. Like that's who the conservative people, the majority of the conservative people in Huntington Beach are. And when they see a candidate that has an R next to their name, they're going to vote for the candidate because they're Republican. The candidate's Republican. I'm going to vote for the Republican. And so I don't think they realized what kind of wagon they hitched themselves to. And my goal is to really bring attention to the fact that this city council doesn't care about Huntington Beach. Like they don't care about us as a community. All they care about is gaining more political power, gaining more influence, and making their way further into Trump's orbit. And
And
we've already seen it happen. Like our previous city attorney, Michael Gates, He brought a bunch of nuisance lawsuits against the state, wasted a ton of taxpayer dollars to try to prevent affordable housing from being built. I think it was like 4 weeks ago, he got hired for Trump's DOJ, funnily enough.
Of
And
course.
I believe it's in the Civil Rights Division. So we'll see how
even
that goes.
better.
Right. And then our one of our other council members, Tony Strickland, just won a race for state senate here. It was an emergency election. He's been in Huntington Beach for all of 2 years, and the only reason he came to Huntington Beach is because he had to move out of Ventura because he got caught embezzling. So he couldn't serve in public office there anymore. Like, these are the people we have to deal with.
Okay, wild. Can you tell me more about the embezzlement scheme? Have you read up on this? This is news to me.
So I read up on it. It was a campaign finance thing where he eventually settled. I think he had to pay back like $70,000 or $80,000, but he did that to avoid like getting actually charged for it. So yeah, he was no longer allowed to be in politics in Ventura. So he's like, well, I'll just move south an hour and a half and see if I can convince people there.
Right. It feels very Tuberville-ish, the way that he relocated, which actually I'll touch on a little bit later. There was one resident who told the LA Times, her name is Barbara Richardson, it turned out the joke was on me because this plaque, which is what you were speaking out against, I should have mentioned that. This was a council meeting where it was a 6-0 vote approved the plaque that spelled out magic, alluring, galvanizing, adventurous, an acronym, of course, for MAGA. So that resident, Barbara Richardson, I continue. It turned out the joke was on me, she said, because the plaque really is the real design. From far away, it looks like the plaque is celebrating 50 years of MAGA, as the word is dead center in the middle of the plaque. This is where one's eyes is drawn to a political slogan. She would say, are political slogans even allowed to be installed on city buildings? Why shouldn't the city be neutral? What's your reaction to that?
Right, and that's what we've been trying to tell the city council is like, we don't want the library to be politicized. Like this whole thing with the plaque is just the latest in a series of events that the city council's been messing with the library. Like it first started with a book ban that Gracie Vandermark brought forward. She wanted to ban a bunch of books from the children's section, almost all of which dealt with LGBTQ issues.
Of course.
Surprise, surprise. The community got outraged about that. So then they moved to, okay, well, we're going to establish an oversight panel composed of like 21 people to judge the content of all the books in the library. Never mind that the librarians already do that. That's literally their job. And so this oversight panel, if there was any content that they felt was inappropriate, it would go into its own special little room. You have to get a pass to check it out. Mm-hmm. And so the community was like, well, you're just trying to ban books again. So we started a petition to stop that, got over either like 16 or 17,000 signatures.
Oh, wow.
So, clearly there's some interest in like not having this be a thing. Then they moved on to trying to privatize the library. Everyone was like, hold up, you can't privatize the library. Like, it's a public community library. Like, the library's fine. We got another petition, another 16, 17,000 signatures. And so those two ballots actually were in the same agenda meeting where I got arrested. They tried to ignore both of the ballots, then realized they were in violation of state law. So now they've decided that instead of either accepting the petitions and just getting rid of the oversight panel and putting, if they privatize the library, we want it to go to a public vote. So that was the second petition. Mm-hmm. So instead of just accepting the petitions or putting the petitions on a normal general election year ballot, they've decided to do a special election for it, which is going to cost us a ton of money that we don't have. Like, we're already in a budget deficit, and it's going to be low turnout, which they're counting on, because they're just going to muster their mega church that's in the area and say, go vote for these things. So now we got to figure out, okay, how are we going to get people aware of this and get out and vote and help protect the library? Because for whatever reason, this council has a hard on to mess with the library.
That is, I think, what so many outside of MAGA are thinking is, how do we fight the good fight and reach these people who are getting screwed? And yet simultaneously, if we're being fully transparent, there are many who have straight disgust for a lot of these people because they put so many marginalized communities in a bad place. So do you feel like you are, in a way, like I've seen your Blue Sky posts, the guy who flipped you off, the older gentleman who yelled at you outside of city council. Do you feel like some are having an awakening?
Yeah, so my whole goal is not really to reach the MAGA folk because I don't think we're ever going to reach them. Like they're in a cult, they're getting propaganda
Yep.
shoved into their face, 24/7 from Fox News, from Facebook, from OANN. Like it's literally there was actually a chart that came out today of people who believe Zelensky is in the right. Republicans just dropped off a cliff. Like after that Trump news conference, it's at like -40 for
Mm.
Republicans who believe Zelensky is in the right, and that's solely due to the messaging that they're getting through their propaganda machines. And like we're not going to be able to deprogram those people. What we have to do is find a way to make the small c conservatives understand that right now you're being the good Germans. Like you voted for Hitler thinking he had your best interests in mind, but guess what? He doesn't have your best interests in mind. He only has his own interests in mind. And if you don't want to have a lot of regrets after the bodies stop falling, maybe do something about it now so we don't get to that point.